Peace. How y'all doing? The title of this video is going to be Gain Staging and Headroom on the Ensoniq ASR 10. So it's not going to be any beats or anything like that. It might be boring for some of you guys. I just uploaded a short with a beat, but I'm trying to give you guys knowledge more than anything else. I could make beats all day. I mean, I'm not saying I'm the best beat maker, but a lot of the reason why I started this channel is because I want to educate other aspiring engineers, aspiring producers, and aspiring artists to show you guys what's like the importance of being informed of what you're doing with your machines, and to actually, learn your machine the best way that you can and learn about audio engineering, because this is going to help you get a better sound overall. So we're going to be talking about the gain structure of the ASR 10, and we're going to talk about like certain concepts that have to do with gain structure overall in your music production. Okay. I changed up my mic. I realized that I was using a Shure SM58, and I actually had it connected to the ASR 10, and I was going through the ASR 10 converters and I was clipping it a bit. So I know that the sound of the audio really impacts a lot, the people's attention span. So hopefully this sounds a lot better, and I'm going to keep trying to improve on every video, as I move forward with the channel. So let's get right into it. I put a link in the description to the ASR 10's manual, so you should be able to get it down there, and that's what I'm going to be referencing in this video. All right, so let me pull that up. I have it here already. All right, so this is the ASR 10's manual right here on this side, and this is the one that I linked in my Dropbox. I made a link. You should be able to download it, and we're going to go straight into the search bar right here. So if you download the manual onto your computer or even onto your iPad or your iPhone, there should be a search in the PDF, and then you could go into Headroom. All right, so right away, you could find out about Headroom right here. So real quickly, it says the ASR 10's 16-bit stereo output converters provide 96 dB of dynamic range. This figure of 96 dB is referred to as the system headroom. Since the ASR 10 is capable of playing 31 notes of polyphony, this 96 dB of system headroom must be divided amongst these 31 voices. If the output level of all sustaining voices exceeds 96 dB, this will result in clipping. As a result, normal sample playback is attenuated by 12 dB to allow multiple voices to sustain simultaneously without clipping, as shown below. All right, so that's a mouthful, obviously. Pause. But basically what they're saying is when you sample into the ASR 10, in order for them to manage or help you manage the headroom that the machine has total, which is 96 dB, what they do is that they attenuate. So attenuate means to lower in volume, right? So you have a normal sample here. That's this image right here where my mouse is circling, and then it goes down by -12. Okay, so there's other ways, right, that happens automatically. So when you sample into the ASR 10, and I'm going to do an example after this talking head type of video. I'm going to clip it in at the end where I'll show you on the ASR 10 how this sounds. It's basically lowered. The volume is lowered, and they do that for you so that if you keep sampling stuff and playing things on top of things, it won't clip. Sometimes you want that clipping to happen. That's an artistic choice that you can make, but it's important that you're not clipping, by mistake, and then your music is sounding really bad and really distorted. That there's no wrong way of making music, but a lot of people that use these creative tools, they do so knowing the rules and then breaking them, right? And then the other manual that I have here is for my my interface. So this is the interface I'm using right now. Like I explained to you guys, I had to get rid of the RME that I had previously because I made some changes. I moved from a studio that I had a commercial studio, and I closed it down. But anyways, this is again, and this is the important I was stressing before about reading your manual and knowing the tools that you're using, right? So I just went all the way to the features at the end, just so that you could know like what's going into what your ASR is going into and how much dynamic range you have there. So here you'll see maximum input is +4 dBu setting. You have 20 dBu, And in the minus 10 dBV setting, you have plus 8 dBV. And I'm not going to get into it because it could be a very confusing topic on what's dB, dBu, dBV, and dBFS. So again, I also, did some work for you guys, and I looked up a Sound on Sound magazine, which is a magazine that I used to subscribe to. I used to get the physical copies of this magazine, and they did a great article that I'm going to reread myself. I'm not going to do it during this video, but it basically explains to you the differences between what these, initials stand for and how to reference them. So I think I have it pulled up right here. Okay, and there you go. It's decibels explained. I'm gonna link this article for you guys to read it, and that way you can understand. As an engineer and as a producer, it's important for you to understand what these things mean and what we're talking about here. But in essence, when you're talking about dB, it's usually the perceived loudness of a signal or a sample, right? So here you're showing also how does the ASR 10 compensate for the loss in the 12 dB of volume. So again, when you sample into the ASR 10, this is your sample, and it automatically gets reduced in volume, right? Now, there is a boost function in the ASR 10 that's under the amp section of the ASR 10. And a lot of people would be like, wow, the drums on the ASR 10 hit so hard when you turn on that boost. It's like a secret button. But all of these things that are secrets and misinformation online, kind of like how they say FL hits harder or the drums on FL hits harder, this is all just gain structure and how the program, the D.A.W. or the machine chooses to define it, right? So even on the 2000 XL, there's also a way to go into the settings and change the gain structure of things. As well as there's areas where you can boost the signal through the record preamp when you're sampling in, or you could also go into like the setup of the mixer in the 2000 XL. And I'll make another video for that, because today we're going to focus mostly on the ASR 10. And let me close this up here. So if you read a little bit further along in the manual, and again, I was rereading the manual recently, and I felt like this is something that I haven't seen talked about enough online or even on YouTube, right? Because the ASR 10 is like this mythical creature, sampler, the best sampler in the world, and it does things that, it does. These are all somewhat true. It does do a lot of things that, samplers and D.A.Ws are just catching up to. Because I think that the people that made it, whoever they were probably musicians, and they were very creative. Their minds were way out there. All right. So anyways, just to get back into what's going on inside the ASR 10. So here they're talking about the boost function. So there may be times that this attenuated level does not offer enough perceived loudness. And again, dB is perceived loudness. So for a certain type of sound, for example, percussion sounds only play at their peak volume, their attack, for a brief instant before decaying. So that's attack, decay, sustain, release, ADSR. So this is why it's important to brush up on your terminology. That way you know what they're referring to. Before decaying quickly to a lower volume. So again, if you have a snare, you're going to have a very sharp attack, and then the tail of the snare goes away. I mean, you can see that. You could see that when you have any snare sample. I have Ableton right here. So let's look up a snare. I know I have something here. Snare. Let's see. Do I have any samples? Samples. Snare. Okay, snare. Any snare. There you go. All right, snare. So let's double click here. So that's the attack of the snare. That's a decay, and then obviously the sustain is how long it lasts, and then the release. So this is where the attack is happening, right? So that's just kind of the example of what we're saying. Like, the most important part is that first attack. So basically, and then it decays quickly to a lower volume. As a result, it is often desirable to have that peak volume be even louder than the loudest attenuated level. This is the purpose for the edit amp boost parameter. It provides a 12 dB boost in volume to allow a wave sample to use all 96 dB of headroom. Since it is unlikely that two percussion sounds will both use the entire 96 dB of headroom at the same exact instance, it is relatively safe assumption that turning boost on for multiple percussion sounds will not result in clipping. So what they're saying is like, you know, a lot of times you don't have a kick and a snare hitting at the same time. Although, you know, if you're making 4 on the floor stuff, you might have that happen. Then you kind of have to pick, like, you know, which one do you want to boost, the kick or the snare? What's more important in your track? There's many places inside the ASR 10 where you can change the gain structure of specific sounds. So that's why it's important to know where these parameters are. And it's the same for your D.A.W. So later on, I'm going to make another video how to access the boost that is in FL if you're using Ableton, for example, because you could get the sounds to hit the same way if you know what's going on and where to find these parameters. The reason why people say that FL hits harder is because automatically there is one thing where FL would put a limiter on the default template that it opens up with. So automatically there's perceived loudness that you're hearing. And then FL tends to have like a more direct way of accessing the boost functions. But again, and I think I said FL, but yeah, FL has a more direct way of accessing these things, whereas Ableton gives you kind of like a blank slate that's pretty, you know, like neutral. And then from there, it allows you to boost things. You know, you just got to know where these parameters are and why you're doing it. You know what I mean? Let me see. Let's go a little bit further before I switch over to the ASR 10 and show you where these gain things are. All right. So this is where we were at, managing your system headroom. Okay, and then it shows you here the drum sample without attenuation, and then you have all your other samples playing at the same time, so then you could keep your system without clipping. Sustaining sounds can remain at their peak volume for as long. So it tells you here the boost parameter should not be turned on for all wave samples. So just because it sounds louder, and louder usually means better to people, doesn't mean you should go turning on the boost on every sample. Unless you're going for that sound and you like what it does, but more than likely you're going to end up clipping your ASR. And it doesn't sound bad when it's clipping because it's like clipping analog. But, you know, just use your ears. But then again, like, you know how you're managing, like, you know, you want things to be dynamic. If you want your music to sound good, you want it to have dynamics, meaning there's things at different volumes, there's things that are more present, there's things that are more in the background, etc. So as a result, if boost is turned on for sustaining sound, it's very likely that playing multiple notes will result in clipping, even if the notes are not all started at the same time. That's like if you have a piano and then you play a chord, you're going to have 3 notes playing at the same time. That could result in clipping. So it tells you here after sampling with record source main out, and that's when you're resampling, because the ASR 10, unlike let's say a 2000 XL, and I'm only referencing these 2 samplers because they're the main ones I'm going to be talking about in this channel because that's what I use. The ASR could resample itself. So it could sample its main outs, meaning whatever's playing through the ASR could be sampled back in. The MPC cannot resample itself. So not at least through the main out while it's playing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but here the edit amp boost parameter is automatically set to on for the new wave sample. This is done because you have sampled the signal that was attenuated by 12 dB, assuming that the boost wasn't on already. And now the sample will be played back attenuated by another 12 dB, because that's just like a behavior of the ASR, that it does the -12 thing every time you sample into it, -12, -12. So what they've done here is they turned the boost on so that it makes up for that 12, and you have the sample sounding at the same volume that it was in your ASR. So that's to compensate, okay? As a final step, after sampling the main out, it is recommended that you optimize your use of Headroom by setting the edit amp boost to off. And performing the command amp normalize gain command on the new wave sample. Okay. So what they're saying here is they're boosting your signal, and then there is a normalized gain. So then normalizing is also another way in the ASR to boost your signal up, or it's kind of like a compressor, you know. There's a lot of things that have normalized. People normalize things in FL. You could normalize a sample, and it's going to bring the dynamic range up. So basically, it's the key to managing your headroom is to determine which non-sustaining sounds, like percussion, usually will be the loudest, and set the boost parameter on only for those sounds. All right, and then it goes into the audio track headroom, which is important when you're sampling, and I'll show you guys that with the screen of the ASR so you could understand it a little bit better. Again, if there's anything that's confusing to you guys, please read the manual yourselves and then ask in the comments. I know I was moving very fast, and here at the end, when I described the main out being resampled, that could be a little bit confusing. But if you understand the concept of the ASR 10 is doing -12 every time you resample, they boosted the signal so that it would sound even if you sample back into itself, you know. So then they're telling you to turn that off because you don't want it to be boosted, like, you know, maybe not even leave the parameter on. You could just normalize the gain, and it has that same effect. Let me see real quick here if I could find the normalize thing so that we can found on 8 pages. Let's see what this is another one. After sampling the main out, the edit amp boost parameter is automatically set to on in order to match the level between the original. Yeah, exactly what I was saying. So it does that to match whatever was in your ASR and the resampled one. So as a final step, after you're happy with the resampled results, then the reason why they tell you to do the normalized gain after is because this is a command that takes up processing power and time. So boost is a quick way to just make the sound have that plus 12 dB, but normalized gain, it prints it into the wave sample. So that's why they're recommending you do this after, because they're letting you like kind of like audition the result of your resampling. And then if you're happy with it, you normalize the gain, and it'll do that 12 dB boost printed onto the actual wave sample. Okay, so that kind of helps explain that. And normalizing the gain. So let's read a little bit on that. That way you can know what's happening when you hit command amp and normalize the gain on a wave sample. So normalizing gain. After you've recorded a satisfactory sample, you should then perform the command amp normalize gain command to optimize use of the full dynamic range of the ASR 10. To do this, press command, then amp, and scroll until the display reads normalize gain. Press enter yes to invoke the command. The display will read data being processed, and it takes like a few seconds, depending on how long your wave sample or how long your sample source is. It could take, longer if you do like 16 bars. But if you do a kick and a snare, it usually processes it pretty quick. And then it'll tell you command completed. So, and then here for more information on the normalized gain command, see section 10, wave data parameters. So again, we did search function, and I'm just going next to wherever that word appears. So right here, it tells you what the normalized gain, this command maximizes the dynamic range of a wave sample. Normalized gain always works on the currently selected wave sample and has no parameters. It will make the sound louder unless it is already at full level. Normalized gain finds the largest sample value and uses that to scale the whole range of the sample to its absolute full level. So here it's showing you, it's a decent picture, but basically it just takes the loudest peak and it tries to compress everything. It's basically a compressor, and volume smoothing also is a dynamic compressor. So you could read more about that. And it'll show you. I don't know what's up with this image here. Probably missing some image. But anyways, I'm gonna move over to the ASR 10. You could, again, look for certain subjects that you want to understand more about the ASR, and that'll help you understand what's going on in your sampler, and also how to use the sampler to its fullest potential. All right, so I'm gonna go and use some audio examples for you on the ASR and show you where to find these functions on the actual keyboard. All right, thank you guys for your patience. Thank y'all for rocking with me. Let's go into the ASR 10. So for this example, we're gonna be using a basic 808 snare that's inside of Ableton. Nothing special, just a regular sample. And there was something that I missed on talking about in the manual, and that's the gain structure of wherever your sound is coming from. So you'll notice that I have my laptop, the headphone out, plugged into an 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch cable that's going into the left side of the ASR 10's record input. So that's coming through the ASR, and you're hearing it through the ASR because I have my monitoring on here. So my source is the left side and my monitor is on. That's why this is the source and the monitor. And I have the track, so edit track pulled up here. And it tells you in the manual, and I'm gonna show you guys a clip at the end, I'm gonna add it to this video, that the mix is automatically set to 60. So it's at 60 dB, it could go all the way up to 99. And the reason why they do this is because when you're sampling, automatically for you to audition the sound, it's the boost function that we were talking about is automatically set to on. So they lower it so that it compensates for this and it doesn't clip while you're monitoring it, okay? And then there's also another description of it telling you that here where you see the signal level and the peak, that you could hit the red a little bit, because when it starts hitting the red, it's still 6 dB away from clipping. And the way that they tell you to use the signal flow to gain stage this is that if that's too low for you, is to go back here, go on the back of the ASR. There's a little knob there. I have it right now online. And then there's an input level here that you could turn. And I could turn that until I see it start to clip a little bit. So I'm using one hand to record. Let me just turn it a little bit, because you could do this. You could go overboard with this. See, it started to get louder. Let me do a little bit more so that I could use it's basically, if I'm hitting the red, it's gonna be like minus 6 dB of before clipping. So you kind of want it to peak a little bit. Let's see, let me keep going. That's a little too much. So you see, you got to kind of do some engineering here before you start to sample. It's still too much. And again, you could clip into it. It might sound good because it's like clipping an analog signal. It's not gonna digitally clip. It's just taking up more headroom in your track. I like to be just where it's like kind of like a compressor. I don't know. I always like to like kiss. We call that like kissing the compressor. It's like right around there. So this is like the engineering part where you're like trying to find the sweet spot that it like lights up just a tiny bit. Yeah, that to me is like lighting up just a little bit. I don't know if you guys can see it. It's not staying like full on. If I go a little louder, it's gonna be like really red. I don't know. But I just go to that point where it's like, if I turn it more, it's gonna be green only. And then if I turn it a little bit, it's gonna be like, right at the edge of clip, at the edge of distortion, like a guitar amp. So that's right there. So I'm gonna go just a little bit. It's like a dial. There you go. So I'm happy with that. And then if that's still not loud enough for you, and I don't recommend doing this, you could change this mix level here. Put that up. I might put it up with the D.A.W entry. It's just gonna be louder. So I'm gonna leave it at 60. because I'm gonna boost it after. So it's a little more, you know. So this is how you can mess with it before it's even in your ASR. So I'm gonna sample, I'm gonna hit sample, input dry. And also here where it has effects select, I'm sampling at 44K because my Ableton is at 48, but basically the samples are usually like 44K. If you put it at 30, you're gonna get some character, but that's because 30 cuts off some high end, right? When you're sampling, and we'll talk more about that later, but that's how to get like darker sounds. But I wanna stay true to the original samples like sound, so I'm gonna stay at 44. It takes up more space in the ASR, but to me, this gives me more of like a neutral sound to start off with. If I wanna go darker, then I'll do that later. So I'm gonna hit sample. The input that I'm sampling is the right. I'm gonna hit enter. I'm gonna pick this last instrument. I was making a beat, so that's taken up. Shuffling data. Okay, so now the ASR is ready to sample. And if you hit enter, it's waiting for a signal to come in. And I have it on my Ableton. I have it so that I could just, I'm in the browser window, I could just press this and it's gonna trigger the sample. And the ASR is gonna read it because the level that I picked is already beyond that threshold parameter. So that mine says 86 seconds left because I have a bunch of samples already in there, but I'm sampling into 8 right here. So let's hit it. Okay, hit enter to stop it from recording. I'm gonna play the root note, which is gonna be just the middle C. So that's my sample right there, okay? Let me pick my sample. So now that the sample is there, it sounds pretty close to the original. But remember, they said that it's attenuated. So this thing could get louder. There's 2 ways to do it. So I'm gonna just sample it into another instrument, the same sound. So it should sound the same. So let me hit sample, input dry right, enter, pick sample instrument number 7 right next to it. I'm gonna hit enter again. It's waiting for the wave sample. There we go, hit enter, same root note. Okay, so now I have the same sound on 7 and on 8. One thing that I will tell you is when you sample into the ASR, I mentioned this in like one of my first videos, you go to edit and pitch, and automatically there's this parameter that's on, which is the LFO amount. And I hit the top and bottom button at the same time to go to 0. You could press them at the same time, go to 0. And it's like a pitch like parameter that's on. As you can see, it says pitch, the LFO, and it makes the sample sound a little bit warbly. So some people be like, oh, the ASR sounds like, it makes it chorusy, it makes my sample sound crazy. That's because this automatically happens when you sample into it. I don't know if that happens on every ASR, but my ASR does that. So I'm gonna do the same thing here. I'm gonna just turn that off because I wanna stay true to the original sound. And I'm gonna hit the 2 buttons there. Oh, there you go. All right. So let's see how it sounds when you turn on the boost first, and then we're gonna see how it sounds when you do the normalized gain. That's the sample as it originally came in. Now I'm gonna go into edit, amp. This is how you turn on the boost function. And it might not be there right away, but you could just hit side button and scroll until you see the boost, okay? So let's turn it on. It's gonna make the sample louder, of course. I don't know if you guys heard that, but it's louder than, that's the full dynamic range of the ASR 10 right there. So it's gonna make, if I put that versus this in my song, which one you gonna think is slapping more? All right. So on the reason why I made 2 is because I wanted to show you what happens when you don't put boost on and just normalize the gain. So let's see what happens there. So we're gonna take the same sample, and then we're gonna do, and this is what I was telling you, command amp, because it's a command, and then it's on normalized gain. And again, if this doesn't appear, you just hit side. So you could scroll through the menu. Volume smoothing is there. They talked about that too in the manual. And then we're gonna just normalize the gain of that snare. Hit enter, and then it's gonna process the data. This was the part I was telling you about. There you go, it's already done. So that's what the normalized sounds like. And then this is what the boost sounds like. I haven't normalized that sample yet. I just boosted it. Normalized. It's a little bit more civil. Boost sounds a little louder. Normalized. Now, what some people do, and I've done this myself, and this is not wrong, after you normalize it, you could then go ahead and boost it. So now you making it, you know, with, now it has like less dynamic range because again, normalized makes everything kind of match the loudest peak, like an expander. I know I said compressor, but it's kind of like an expander, and then you could boost it on top of that. So let's see how the normalized and boosted signal sounds. Even louder than this. I don't know if you guys could hear it, but it sounds a little sharper. Again, I couldn't connect everything to the DAW to record these examples, but that's normalized and boosted, and this is just boosted. And then this is the original sample with the boost off. And we're still monitoring Ableton, so this is how it hits in Ableton. That's why processing through your ASR and then recording back into Ableton, you could get drums to hit harder. So some people process their drums through the ASR, and you know, you could sell that in packs. Maybe I'll make a pack in the future, because in Ableton, that's how it's hitting without anything happening. My bad, my phone ran out of memory. So in Ableton, this is how it's hitting without anything happening. And when you sample into the ASR, if you don't do anything to process the sound, AKA turn on boost or normalize, then that's kind of, you get the same thing. You get the same thing that's happening in Ableton. Sounds exactly the same as Ableton. But again, the ASR, and this is what you have to do in the box if you want to get the same sound out of Ableton, that like you want your Ableton to sound like an ASR, is you gotta try to boost it without clipping the sound. Normalize, and that's hard to achieve without clipping in Ableton. So obviously I'll do a tutorial later on how to get this to happen in Ableton, but there's ways to do it. There is ways to do it. You could use, you know, Decapitator, which is a third-party plugin, or you could use, like, I don't know if I'll find it again, but Drum Rack. Okay, and then let's see if I can find the sound that I had. 808. Where is it? Packs. Oh yeah, there we go. Snare. You could boost the gain here. You're still not clipping. So that's similar to boosting on the ASR. The ASR is obviously still louder, but you get the point. You could turn up the velocity here. See, now you're in the red. So the ASR is able to do that without getting in the red. Then you could use other audio effects like the glue compressor. Put that on the sound. Do soft clipping. Let's take off this here. See, now you're not going digital. Now you're not clipping digitally. getting closer to that. Now it's very close to the ASR. And then, wait, my bad. It's hard to film and record at the same time, but I want to give you guys real, right? And then ASR. Very similar. That's about it. That's as much as I'm gonna get. What sounds better? You be the judge. Can it be done on both? Yes. I prefer to work with hardware just because I'm used to it, but it's just understanding. This is all knowledge and understanding. So if you get what's happening, you're able to do that and you could stop chasing unicorns. I'm gonna go back into the talking head and screen record a little bit more just to talk you guys out of it, out of this subject matter, and go over the audio track and what I was talking about there. All right, thank you guys. Peace. All right, cool. So hopefully that that wasn't too shaky and confusing to you. Also, the audio I was recording straight off of my phone. Right now, I only have 2 inputs available on my interface, so it's difficult for me to record the audio into a DAW and then do the voiceover at the same time. So ideally, I would need either a mixer or an interface that had 3 inputs, so I could record my mic while I'm talking to you guys, and also record the audio out of the stereo outs of the ASR. But I just wanted to give you guys a basic understanding of like where to find these things on the ASR, what's going on, and how this sounds. We were hearing the audio through my iPhone. It's coming out of the focals that I have up in my room. And it's kind of late, so it's also not the ideal time for me to be turning things up too much. But you should have been able to hear, and maybe headphones will help, like the sound either getting louder, quieter, or even just more compressed and having less dynamic range. Like when I had the normalization and then I boosted it on top of that, you know, it sounded louder, but it was also sounding to me like way more compressed. And then at the end, you know, just for fun, I went quickly into how you can make your Ableton sound like an ASR. I mean, it's not going to sound like it because obviously there's different converters coming out of, you know, in this case, my Apple computer's headphone out versus the ASR, which is coming out of the ASR, going through the duet and out into the focals. In this case, the Apple computer is coming out of the headphone, going through the input of the ASR, out of the ASR into the duet and out of the focals. So, I mean, it's a little bit confusing what's happening there, but I just wanted to give you guys an example of you could boost things in Ableton. You could make them sound louder. You could make them not clip. You could make them soft clip by using the glue compressor. So all these things are possible if you understand gain structure, headroom, dynamic range, what's going on in your DAW, in your sampler of choice, in your hardware piece of choice. And it starts with getting informed, getting the right knowledge, and not just listening to like these terms like, oh, it hits harder. I don't know why, but it just slaps more on the ASR. Oh, FL hits hard. Like these things do not mean anything. There's people's perception of how they define things, but that's not going to make you a better engineer or a better musician. If you could know how to communicate those things, obviously it is going to make you a better engineer to know when somebody's telling you, oh, I want it to hit harder. Okay, maybe they want it to soft clip so that they could perceive the loudness a little bit higher than it is at the moment. So stay informed. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the audio track headroom that I explained in the video. So I'm going to read this again, boring. The audio tracks are permanently set to boost on, even though it doesn't show that. But again, when you're monitoring the thing you're about to sample on the ASR, it's already boosting it by 12 dB. To prevent clipping, the edit track mix parameter for the audio tracks defaults to mix equals 60. That's what I was showing you. When mix equals 99, the audio track will use the entire 96 dB dynamic range. If you hear clipping when monitoring audio input on an audio track, first adjust the mic line switch. That's the back thing that I kept playing with. and the input level trim control so that the red input level peak LEDs only light occasionally. The red peak LED light at 6 dB below clipping, and then set the edit track mix parameter to a lower value. So it tells you to start there first, and then you could change that part where it says 60. And again, I'm using my office voice, my telephone office voice, so that I could be as, intelligible as possible, as clear as possible to you guys, because it is important to like use the right terminology when we're speaking about these things so that we can actually have clear understanding instead of these myths that are going on the internet and on forums about gain structure and things hitting harder than others. Yes, there are machines that have better converters because of the brands that they used at the time and how these things have aged over time, and maybe how these things handle headroom, okay? But past a certain point, the only thing you're going to do is distort your sound and end up harming your hearing, and then making really, non-dynamic type of music. Leave that to the mastering guys, the engineers, to make your stuff louder. But if you can, stay within a nice dynamic range and have headroom in your music, you're going to end up with a better overall track. And also when you get to the mastering stage, which I highly recommend working with an engineer, if you give him a track that has a decent amount of headroom, where they say, leave like 3 dB, 6 dB of headroom when you send me the track to master it, that's because they want to have headroom, aka space, like this is space here, this gray area is representing headroom, so that they can make it louder with their gear that's probably way more expensive than your little Isotope Ozone mastering suite. So they use compressors and equalizers to boost, and they want to have headroom and space. So if you send them a track that's already at 0 dB, they don't have any space or headroom to make your track louder or to, add a little bit of sibilance or high end to your vocal with their $10,000 EQ, instead of, thinking that you can use AI or Fruity Loop mastering and stuff. And again, I'm not against all of these things, but the engineering, speaks differently about the approach to this process. And that's why we respect and keep, our peers employed throughout our industry, because there is a need for people that understand these things and do them with the correct approach. I'll do other videos if you guys want to know more about gain staging. There's gain staging happening when this microphone is connected to my 1073 and my Tube Tech. There's certain things there that give me a nice vocal sound, and you have to know how to do this if you want to be a professional engineer in the industry, recording, artists, any type of artists, rappers, drill rappers that get really loud and close to the microphone. You got to know how to handle your headroom, and also how to do a nice gain structure so that you get a nice and clear sound. Anyways, I could talk about this all day because it's a topic that I love to discuss. And, get in there in the comments. And if you think that I said anything that was incorrect, correct me. I'm open to, educated discourse, and let's get it. Let's keep ourselves improving every day. Try to understand your samplers, your machines, and try to understand, this industry that you are choosing to make part of your life and part of your art. In order to express that art the best way possible, you need to know what's going on. All right. This is your boy Free Play. If this was a little bit too, nerdy for you guys, let me know too. I'll make more how to make a quick beat type video, but again, my role here and my purpose is to keep you guys informed. And when I teach this, I learn more about it myself too. So peace.